Ladies, gentlemen, and haradrim of all ages, Mythic Uniques are the very top of the rarity scale when it comes to items in this game, the ones that you are least likely to see, even if you engage with the content that purposefully drops it more often than others. These items have had quite the history since the launch of base Diablo 4 over a year and a half ago now, from being newsworthy the first time one had been reportedly dropped for any player in the world, because it was weeks after the game started, to now being something that you can very actively target farm and even remove all RNG from the process by using crafting to make a specific Mythic Unique, but especially with changes made in Season 6 to the whole process that were further affected by drop rate changes in Season 7 for Rune specifically. I sort of just wanted to stop and look at it right now and talk about this, how it stands currently, in the hopes of helping catch the issue before it becomes even more of a problem in future seasons if it's not addressed. So first then, let's just talk about Mythic Uniques in general and where they sit this season as far as power compared to other items. Then we'll talk about the process for getting Mythics, and the biggest note of contention for me personally by far, the process of crafting Mythic Uniques. As for the power then, there are of course a few duds among the Mythics right now. They haven't been rebalanced in Season 7, so the ones that weren't great before still aren't great now. But the Shroud of False Death chest piece is essentially best in slot for any build that doesn't require a class-specific unique in that slot to function, and then the same usually goes for either the Heir of Perdition helmet, the Harlequin crest, or in some cases in tyraels visage as helmets, where again, if a build doesn't have a requirement of a class-specific unique helmet or specific tempering needs perhaps, then these are just a no-brainer to slot in really, which one that you use depending on your actual style of build. And then there's the Ring of Starless Skies as well as a ring, which still does see a lot of use, but isn't quite as mandatory feeling as the ones that I mentioned before, especially as legendary aspects get more impactful, like the two new ultimate skill affecting legendaries this season. That said, considering what Mythic Uniques are intended to be, the ultimate moment of dopamine rush that you're supposed to get when they drop, I think that they should all be on the tier of at least Starless Skies. You don't want all of them to be so good that you end up with players having like 4 or 5 Mythics in their build to reach maximum power, so you don't want like all of them to be Shroud of False Death level, but Starless Skies level is good, where they are essentially competitive with the best of their options in the slot. Some builds will use them, some builds will not, but they have their actual place. So then next up, let's talk about how we actually get Mythic Uniques to drop in the first place right now, which for the most part is 2 sources. The first is the one that's been the main dropper of Mythics for months now, which is the lair bosses in higher difficulty tiers, especially the ones that require materials to actually summon the bosses to begin with. Season 6 had the last direct changes to this system, with the change to how difficulty tiers work, giving technically higher chances per kill doing it on Torment 4 compared to the old World Tier 4, and by making both Duriel and Dendariel as bosses have higher drop rates of Mythic Uniques than the other lair bosses once again, which they did in the previous season. The main way to loop this then is while killing lair bosses, they will eventually drop the Crest Undercity Tribute of Titans. This makes the Undercity activity drop a bunch of boss summon materials at the end, and doing this specifically in a group with 4 members being ideal, you can get to a point where this is just an infinite gameplay loop of generating and then spending materials. And this is a fine farm, but it's one that players are used to doing every season and for a good chunk of time to get what they are actually after. This has also changed over time too. The other main method that has become more viable this season is the Tribute of Ascendance for Crest Undercity. These have a decent chance of dropping Mythic Uniques, seemingly improved chances from last season, and the general community findings are putting this at around a 1 in 4 chance of a Mythic Unique dropping at the end of the activity, which is honestly really solid for what this is. All that said, these are the same activities that existed for this farm last season, with drop rates on one of them seemingly even improved, and yet getting Mythic Uniques does feel worse to me this season than it did last season. The main reason is that part of what makes Mythic Uniques more achievable is the ability to craft them, to remove the RNG and say, this is the one I want, I'm going to make it, and if you have the materials and the gold, you get it, simple as that. This was at its best state, in my opinion, in Season 5 and Season 4, where it required a pile of Resplendent Sparks and a pile of gold. You could pick which one you wanted and then you got one. The Resplendent Sparks come either from salvaging Mythic Uniques that you aren't going to use, or from a few guaranteed sources. These are still a thing now, and you get one from your first Lilith kill of the season, the Uber Lilith fight, one from the final chapter of the season journey, and you get one at the end of the Coven's Favor reputation track as well, which can be done again on any more characters that you make too. In Season 5, all it took was sparks and gold to make your chosen Mythic Unique, and that meant that pretty much any player that was in a proper endgame build and spent at least a little bit of time boss farming ended up with at least their one singular preferred Mythic Unique item, and that is awesome. That's fun for everyone. And then in Season 6, they reshuffled this pretty massively into the system that we have now still, where you can turn 2 Resplendent Sparks and a big chunk of gold into a random Mythic Unique, or if you want to craft a specific one like we used to be able to, you need 2 Resplendent Sparks and 18 runes total, 6 of a specific rune from each rarity. The first and biggest complaint that I have about the system that I have said before before, but I feel like really should be said louder and even more frequently until we get a response to it, is that it excludes players that did not buy the Vessel of Hated expansion. It takes a mechanic that was available to anyone who had the base game in Season 5, which is crafting specific Mythic Uniques, and then locks it behind the paywall of Vessel of Hatred because you cannot even have runes drop or pick runes up without the expansion, which means if you didn't buy the expansion, you can now only craft random mythics at the blacksmith. I understand that they like the concept of using the runes for another system, and logistically, if everyone could get runes, the system would be pretty okay to me, but it's the fact that it takes something that was previously available without the Vessel of Hatred expansion and makes it expansion only. It locks in a pre-existing mechanic behind a paywall, and I think that is really a big stain on the game that needs cleaning up sooner rather than later before I can be happy with the state of things in general. All that said, leaving that to the side for now, pretending that that's not even a concern, even for the people who can use the system, the people who do have the expansion, it does feel notably worse than it did last season, and the main reason is that rune drop rates have just been significantly lowered, or at least the drop rates of legendary rarity runes specifically. Sure, if you do like 100 tyraels in a row, you'll still end up with a good pile of legendary runes, but part of the point of crafting specific Mythic Uniques is to be for the people who don't want to do hundreds of boss runs just to get the one mythic that they're after. Last season this was super achievable for most players, even if it was a little bit more of a hassle than Season 5, because even if you didn't have the runes, you could trade for them, they were relatively cheap, and you would probably have other legendary runes, if not the ones that you needed, which people were mostly willing to trade just sort of one for one. At least compared to this season, where they've ballooned to most legendary runes being traded for hundreds and hundreds of millions of gold. So getting 6 of the same rune could mean spending billions of gold total, and the only players who have billions of gold are either the ones who are selling the runes to begin with, or people who properly engage with farming and trading away good items in exchange for gold, which is absolutely just honestly not a healthy place for the system to be in, as far as I'm concerned. There's currently a feeling of competing design philosophies to me going on here, where Mythic Uniques in general are dropping more than before, but getting a specific Mythic Unique is much slower. Progression should be faster than ever before in the game, except for runes, which should be slower, and that would also affect crafting mythics as well. I'm someone who loves a good long-term grind if it's an enjoyable activity to farm, but it has to be something with concrete goals that you can actively see what you're after. And right now, the only concrete goals to get a specific Mythic Unique in a short period of time is to trade for the runes if you have gold, and to use the out-of-game resources to do so without getting scammed on the value of your trades too. And so it feels pretty off to me right now. I don't think this is like the sky falling down or whatever. We're not there yet, but systems like this are like playing Jenga. You can move one brick slightly too fast and then the whole tower will just come crumbling down, toppling over. So I'm trying to call it the pain point that I can see before it becomes a real proper problem later on. And also still mentioning that I don't like the whole paywall thing with the runes and the expansion and everything. I still think that shouldn't be a thing in the first place. That just about does it for today, everyone. A sort of discussion about how Mythic Uniques are feeling this season as a whole in terms of their power in relation to other gear, how farming them feels, and of course a whole conversation around crafting them too. I hope you've enjoyed this, and of course let me know any of your own thoughts on this system down in the comments below. Like if you liked the video, subscribe to the notification bell for more, and most importantly, ladies and gentlemen, until next time, stay sweet.
Josh, Cotton, and Hollow with the videos, dropping the humor like a hammer on your tippy toes, bringing entertainment on a daily arrangement to take our insanity and turn it into entertainment. Yes, I said entertainment twice, to reiterate that it is nice to look into your faces on a mostly daily basis when you let us in your homes to make the whole world a stage. Goodbye.